Glad you could make it tonight. Tonight's motion is to be racially blind. We know this is a little vague, so please allow me to give a quick summary of what will be discussed. The debaters for the motion are arguing that we should be racially blind, which means that in our thoughts, ideas, laws, actions, and also our policies, we should not take race into account. They believe that this is the way to create a better, more fair society with more equality. The debaters against this motion the debaters are against this motion that in today's society, and believe that in today's society, ignoring a person's race is not the solution, and that this is not how we will create a better world to live in. Now, please take time to vote for the pre-debate poll. I will post it in the Discord channel right now. And we will give you a couple minutes and then start the debate. Woo! Woo!
I like debate.
We like debate.
We like debate. We like debate.
Sorry, I fumbled my words.
Don't be late.
Didn't help me.
Don't worry.
Didn't even notice it.
Yeah. It's all good.
Yeah.
All right, so I posted the link. It's a poll link. Please vote. It looks like we will have 4 voters right now, so I will monitor that.
Cut that part out.
It's a 400% increase.
We have 400 voters.
New record!
400 voters.
1,000? I think he meant thousands. Yeah. We don't. Yeah.
So Ron, like,
Because it's in my account, I can't vote because someone could be up their phone. Not you, because we're probably going up here, right?
hold on, I'll give it to you.
Yes.
Because it won't let me do it because it's trying to lock. Because it thinks I created it.
Nice, Joe voted pre-debate for once. Woo! Good job, Joe.
Nice work, Joe.
You did it, Joe.
Joe, I'm proud of you. You've really stood up for what you believe in and acted like a true Republican.
I think this is proof that the mass public voting advertisements to get people to vote has been really effective in this election cycle. We really need to keep those texting chains up more. You know, I really want to see more of those in 4 years. I think I speak for all of America when I say that.
Yeah, I also love that they get nonstop text messages for political groups every election cycle.
All right, everybody. So our votes are in. The pre-debate votes are in. Thank you for the audience members. You guys are great. We love you all. Now, race is obviously a big topic in America. Just in this last year alone, it has really been one of the main topics on the forefront of how we've decided to view our country we live in, the way that people have lived their lives, the way they voted. It's just been a very, very critical issue in our country. So like any important topic on race, a group of white males in a room are about to tell you how it should be. So I'm going to start by introducing tonight's debaters. For the motion that we should be racially blind, the first debater is Derek Dobish. The second debater on his team will be Boone Greenlee.
Thank you.
Now, against the motion, the first debater is Ben Rippey, and his teammate in this debate against the motion is Seth Eastwood. So we're going to start this debate by giving each side 2 minutes for opening statements, and throughout the debate, please take time to post questions in the Discord channel, and I will monitor those, and we will move on to those in the next portion of our debate. So we will begin with opening statements from you, Mr. Derek Dobish.
Alrighty. Okay. America is caught in an internal crisis. For For centuries, there has been tension between racial groups within our country, and there have been many different attempts to resolve these issues. However, within the last decade, we have been on a backslide. The cause of this regression is the abandonment of equality in favor of equity. We don't need to look any further than the destruction and chaos of the 2020 riots to see that treating people differently doesn't bring them closer together. In fact, it drives a wedge between racial groups to the point that some organizations on the left are advocating for a return to racial segregation. The opposition would have you believe that the only way to solve this is to throw money at the problem and create a formalized racial hierarchy in America, whereby the most oppressed are given the most. We stand in opposition to this idea as it flies in the face of our most American value, that all men are created equal. The horrors of our past cannot be allowed to return. We need to treat people equally, regardless of who they are or where they are in their lives. Identity politics will destroy us if we let it. Please, for the sake of future generations, vote for the motion and for equality. Thanks to everyone who came out in person tonight, and thanks to everyone watching on the live stream. I hope you enjoyed tonight's show.
Thank you, Derek. All right, moving to the first debater against the motion, Ben Rippey.
Thank you, Blake. As Derek mentioned, for centuries, our country has had institutionalized and legalized racism. And turning a racially blind eye is turning a blind eye towards racism that has existed in this country and it continues to exist to this day. The George Floyd riots that Derek mentioned are an example of how the Black community felt about people who are racially blind and how they ignored the injustices that happened, the racist injustices that happened within our law enforcement and our prison systems. White and Black people are charged with the same crime, are faced with different punishments based on race, based on these years and this legacy that racism has left in our country. We need to create affirmative action to undo and fight this racist people and culture that has existed and continues to exist in many parts of our country today. Minorities still make up an unproportional percentage of the low income and kept from succeeding. They are born into ghettos we created through segregation that was still on the books. Even Minnesota is still one of the most segregated states due to this red zoning. This results in Black children being born in the equivalent of a Minnesota ghetto with the worst access to healthcare, fresh produce, school, education, and jobs. The result is often turning to a life of crime and living off the government. More affirmative action needs to take place in order to make sure these opportunities are the same for Black people and other minorities as it is for the rest of society. We need to create solutions and actions to combat this racism and this legacy that has been left behind.
Thank you, Ben. All right, moving on to, for the debate, debater number 2, Boone Greenlee.
Hi, yeah, I'm Boone Greenlee. I think this topic is important. It's worth the risk of offending someone. Someone may not like what we say. They might even not forgive us. I think that's unlikely, but we need to keep this discussion alive. I also believe my opponents genuinely want to make things better, as do I. Let's try to find the optimal course together. I want to say that some definitions here. The differences between equality and equity must be emphasized. Although both promote fairness, equality achieves this through treating everyone the same, regardless of need, while equity achieves this through treating people differently, dependent on need. However, this different treatment may be the key to reaching equality. I'm quoting this from what I did today, researching these definitions. I'm not just outright against equity. My youngest is 2 years old and my oldest is 8. I treat them differently as they have different needs. But I'm a parent and they are my children. Applying this to capable adults is wrong. Using the equity approach on race is declaring most people who are non-white in an automatic position of greater need and inferiority. This is insulting at best. It's unproductive and downright white supremacist in its very nature. I don't deny that racism exists. It does in many places, but the fastest way to reduce it is to be racially blind. That's all I got.
All right, moving on to the second debater against the motion, Seth Eastwood.
Let me start by describing two issues. Slavery was abolished 156 years ago. That amount of time only allows 6 generations of black families to navigate this originally extremely racist, white-dominated country to get out of poverty. There's still over double the rate of black people in poverty than white people. Another concerning issue is regarding the over 500 federally recognized tribes in the United States. Historically, American Indians had nearly all of their land stolen, villages pillaged, and their cultures destroyed. Their children were even taken from their families, forbidden to speak their own languages, and put into boarding schools to be assimilated in order for white colonists to kill the Indian and save the man. A quote by Captain Richard Pratt regarding the central idea of the Carlisle Indian boarding schools developed in 1879. American Indian assimilation is still happening today, and they have an even higher poverty rate than black Americans. How can these fellow humans be treated as equally as white people when they were treated so unequally historically, to the point that still today they have a disproportionately higher poverty rate? This is a cyclic issue that began because of white men, which has passed from generation to generation. We can't be racially blind. We must see these racial issues in order to develop a future society where everyone can be treated equally, fairly, and justly. To not see this issue is a racial injustice, and the only way to become truly equal is to first be equitable.
Thank you, Seth. Great job, gentlemen. Wonderful opening statements. So the format for this debate is we're going, after opening statements now, we're going to move into a free, casual, inter-panel discussion. I will try to step in from time to time to add my thoughts if I feel that it is helpful. After that, we'll move to questions. I will generate some, as well as I will be taking questions from the audience. And then at the end, we're going to go to closing remarks. So, on to the free inter-panel discussion. As the members that are for the debate, I will invite Derek and Boone to begin the inter-panel discussion.
I'll start. Seth brought up some good points about past wrongs within our society, and I think that I just want to make it clear to anyone listening at home that no one is trying to excuse those wrongs or to make it seem as if they aren't actually a problem. The difference between the opponents and proponents of the debate is how to proceed going forward. We've tried, specifically with the example that Seth brought up with the Native American tribes that have been brutalized and forcibly assimilated into American culture. One of the things that we've seen is probably the greatest and most dramatic example of disparate treatment between racial groups. And for the past 150 years or so, it doesn't seem to have actually done anything beneficial for the Native Americans. They have been given privileges that all other races in America of Americans don't have, and yet they still seem to be suffering under abject poverty and just misery that other people don't have. They have their own land, their own sovereign land. They have income that's provided to them guaranteed by the state, businesses that non-Native Americans can't operate, and just general societal privileges that others don't have to try to make up for the past mistakes. Yet it seems to only be making things worse for them. So I would posit that as an actual example of why the equity approach or treating people differently is not actually beneficial, even though it might seem that.
off that Indian tribal land, Native American tribal land comment, I would say if you compare where our sovereign nations are now compared to where they were 50 to 100 years ago, before we really allowed them to actually utilize those privileges, they're much better off now than they were before. And it's only been a recent phenomenon in which we've actually allowed them to exercise rights as a sovereign nation. We told them they were a sovereign nation, but we told them they can't do anything. They can't buy it. For the longest time, they couldn't buy land outside. We forced them into these ghettos, forced them into poverty, and now we're saying, okay, we'll like give you some business benefits, and they've now started to thrive. There's still lots of work that needs to be done, and there's still a lot more opportunities we need to give them, but we have still forced them into these ghettos, and we are just now beginning to attempt to get them out of them.
Well, the assimilation process is part of why they're struggling so much. They had their cultures destroyed. They didn't have the resources to start these kind of Americanized style of communities to develop. They didn't know American law. They didn't have lawyers. They didn't have police force. They didn't have a healthcare system when we came into this country, or when white settlers came into this country. So the idea of a tribal sovereign nation is still in its infancy today, and we need to provide them with the resources to become what they want to become in a society that we've basically surrounded them with and that they have to work with. Like, the idea that they can just suddenly work on their own and become successful without any background of how the law works or any background of how healthcare works is just it's impossible. You have to provide them with the tools.
But it doesn't take 6 generations for someone to learn how the law or healthcare works. I mean, all of us weren't born knowing
That
what
was
healthcare
1879 when they first made that boarding school.
Yeah.
That's 100 and like 30 years ago.
Yeah.
That's maybe 5 generations.
Racist laws were just
And
off the book in the 1950s,
that was-
1968, in fact.
That's
a couple generations ago that we've now just stopped being racist to people.
Yeah.
And that's not as a whole, that's when the government stopped being racist to people. So there's still a mountain of racist people and policies in place that we're still working to overcome. You can't throw somebody in a ghetto and then say like, oh, well, we stopped a little while ago, how come you're not better now? And it's like, well, because it takes a while to build a city, a thriving city out of a ghetto.
Right. And those boarding schools still exist. You know, in 1879, that was when one started. You know, we're talking about them still existing today and them still being shut down in the last 30 years.
So if I may, Ben said a lot of things. He said, like, yes, 130 years ago, Native Americans were worse off. He's absolutely right. 130 years ago, every human being was worse off than they are today. Humanity has improved vastly over that period of time. There's almost 130 years is a long time. I'm a little bit disappointed that these are the time frames that like are being laid out as somehow normal or acceptable. I would like things to be a little quicker. My point is, I'm trying to offer what I think is a solution to get things better much faster than hundreds or perhaps thousands of years. So I did some data or research, and I found some data from the Harvard Business Review that says organizations with strong commitments, I'm quoting this, strong commitments to diversity are no less likely to discriminate. In fact, research by Cheryl Kaiser and colleagues has demonstrated that the presence of diversity values and structures can actually make matters worse. So what I'm trying to talk about is here that according to another recent study found that since 1950, there has been no progress toward income or wealth equality between black and white households in the United States. What I'm getting at is we're completely stalled out. We keep doing what doesn't work, and we know it doesn't work. So these websites, some of the better ones, acknowledge they don't have the answer. I think it's an important place to start. The data would suggest that these initiatives that are planned and in progress right now are actually going to make things worse and have been making things worse.
I would like to rebuttal with an example from the Native Americans. They have their own schools that have a 100% passing rate in state tests for their high schoolers in terms of passing and graduating. And these are Native American run schools that were in the past boarding schools, but taken over and run now by Native Americans. Meanwhile, in public schools, these same Native Americans have maybe a 50% passing rate. And in tribal lands, their unemployment rate is over 50% a lot of the time. So a lot of it is due to an opportunity gap based on their inability to identify with who they are and succeed in a world that's
When we've created ghettos with a lack of opportunity
it's-
as well, with less jobs, with less access to healthcare,
Right.
with less food availability.
for Native Americans, it's their culture that's being basically shamed by the white kind of culture that we have that we probably aren't even fully aware of that we have, because we look at history from a white perspective, not from a Native American perspective. So when a Native American is in a public school, they're seeing everything in an assimilated kind of ethnic cleansing sort of way. So it's hard for them to be passionate about their future.
Well, I gotta stop you right there because you're pointing out something that I don't think actually really supports your position, which is difference in achievement gaps based on which school someone went to. If the Native American population going to the Native American run schools have 100% passing rate, and Native Americans going to non-Native American schools have a much lower passing rate, that doesn't suggest that white people are inherently ruining or destroying these students going to the non-Native American schools. A much better explanation, especially considering the other metric you brought up, which was the unemployment rate, is that these Native American schools aren't holding their students to the same standards, and they aren't actually preparing them.
These are state tests. They are the same standards, and it is the curriculum that the public schools use.
Okay,
that
then
makes it difficult.
why do they still suffer from the 50% unemployment rate?
That's because they, in their tribal lands, they haven't had the tools. They
There's
don't.
less opportunities,
Less opportunity.
businesses, and
It
they
wasn't built up by a generation of white people who came from Europe
They
who
can
developed
move.
everything.
They don't have to stay there. Lots of people move for jobs.
And they
Yeah.
have. There's an example of that too, where white people,
saying.
and I don't like to say white people, but like the people of our country
Yeah.
said, hey, you can come to Colorado and be successful. Like, we will give you this opportunity. And they move from their tribal lands into this new city. And then they end up even worse off because of the racial profiling and the discrimination.
And then also the fact that you're saying there's no, capital and there's no businesses in the tribal land. You got to go to where the white people are if you want to get rich and escape poverty and find a job. It's like, well, that's a racist institution is what you're saying.
No.
You can't find a job in tribal land because there's less opportunities. So you got to go where the white people are. That's a straight up sign of a racist culture
No,
And-
that's absurd
and-
because you can go to anywhere in the world and find a job if you have the requisite skills and talents.
Sure. Well, not anywhere in the world. If you go out in the country, you can't find one. If you go to the ghetto, you can't
Fine.
find one. And if you go to a tribal land, you can't find
You
one.
can go to any community based on any race and find a job if you have the requisite skills and talents. If I'm a highly skilled welder, I could get a job in China. I could get a job in the Middle East. I could get a job in Europe or Africa.
But what if they have all the welder jobs are fulfilled? They don't need any more welders. You can't get a job there.
Then
right?
that's a broader economic problem
So-
and not a racial problem. You have put your money, put your time and effort into an oversaturated market.
Right.
It's not racism.
Right, but you also need factories, you need businesses in order to create economic opportunities. for
Why does it
people.
matter that jobs are specifically created in Native American lands? Why can't the Native Americans just go to places where jobs are and get those jobs?
Because you're saying like, why can't businesses mostly run by white people, why can't they go to these tribal lands where they're thriving for employment and labor? Why do they refuse to go to these ghettos?
I mean,
I
I
don't
think
know.
Why?
I'm not an American.
And that's
lot of
my
the
point is
problem
if
there-
we take affirmative action and say like, let's encourage economic business opportunities to have businesses pop up in these places, to encourage businesses to grow. Let's incentivize them that way to make it equal opportunity and not to say like, oh no, we don't build businesses in North Minneapolis, or no, we don't build businesses on that tribal land because
I
that's
don't think
where
we
all
should
the
be doing that anywhere. Businesses should make their own decision based on where they think is best.
Well, what if
And
there's
you
a
can-
racist business owner, right? Who's like, I don't want to go to North
Then that
Minneapolis.
creates an opportunity for the non-racist business owner to capture the unutilized
Yeah, and
labor.
that's what the South said about segregation. Why they justified it? They said, well, we're not going to serve black people because that gives an opportunity for black people to have their own businesses. And what did that result in? It resulted in worse economic conditions for black people.
Do you think that the South is still that way?
Yes.
That no one hires black people anywhere in the South?
I'm not saying no one ever
most-
hires black people. I'm saying they have less opportunities. Despite lots of people being colorblind, there's still going to be some racist people out there, some racist legacy left behind, and you need a proactive, positive force to counteract those negative forces that have been left behind and those negative people.
it's a known fact that people who come from a impoverished family, generation after generation, it takes a long time for those families to get out of that poverty. And when you're born into a family that's rich, you are rich just because of that for
Yes.
probably 10 generations.
But
at
that's
least.
true regardless of your race.
Yeah, and what we've
Like-
done is we've made people poor. We've
Yes.
made specific races poor.
Right.
And we've specifically put them into cultures and ghettos and said, you are poor, and been suppressing them for years and years and years and years and years.
Right, you think-
literally centuries.
For this, slavery ended, and there's been maybe 6 generations of families living in a world that's dominated by white people who are racist against them. You think that 6 generations is long enough for them to come out of poverty? Like, I think you're blind to how hard it is to come out of poverty when you're born in a family like that. Like, it's
So
That's
I'd like to flip that concept on its head. a
Well,
bit.
and it's not even 6 generations. That's since they've been enslaved.
yes.
That's since and since how long has it been since we've actually not had racist laws? Like since the 1960s. That's the laws themselves. That's not even the people.
Right, they're not
changing
even
at that
in
point.
poverty. They
That's
are
our-
slaves.
That's
All right.
my parents were born
What-
at that time.
What
period.
about people who are doing better than white? I'm talking about ethnic minorities in the U.S., such as East Asians, Chinese, Japanese, Korean. We've got ethnically Jewish people, and we have Indian immigrants from India.
Yeah, these people have not been discriminated against as largely as black people and Indians. Indians and black people.
So
have
you
both-
would, so then you agree.
How do you know that?
You
Okay,
agree
black
that
people were slaves, and Indians had their land stolen from them,
Yeah,
and
we
their
committed
children
mass
taken.
genocide.
Yeah, it was literally mass genocide and ethnic cleansing committed against these people versus Asians who just were also like Europeans. They came in. And,
You ever heard of the Transcontinental Railroad? Those Asians weren't treated very well. They were treated like slaves, like indentured
Side by side with the Irish.
I would like to point out that Asians have almost the same poverty rate as whites,
Yes, but they also outperform whites at the top end.
and they've been successful.
Yep.
Yes.
We haven't
That's-
institutionalized racism against Asians
So
in the same
that's-
way we have for
Yeah.
the black population and the native population. Maybe in some parts of the United States there was some institutionalized racism against Asians for a small history,
It's not
but for
as
the
dramatic.
grand majority of U.S. history, black people and Native Americans have been largely discriminated against and continue to be largely discriminated against.
So
These-
where do you think America is now? Do you think that America now is racist? We talked a lot about the past.
So
I really would like to talk about moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
So
think-
if America now is still racist, why are these non-white groups outperforming whites?
because of generational cyclic, just family inherited positions.
So
there's
America's
twofold.
racist against white people more than Asians? Like,
I'm not a
No.
racist. I'm not this person who enslaved black people, but I come from a generation of people who did.
Well, I think too, yeah, so that's part of it. We have a legacy left behind. But if we, presently, I do think there is a significant percentage enough of the US population that is either blatantly racist, if not blatantly racist, then quietly racist, is what I would say. So you could, if, some examples of this would be like on OkCupid, black men and women are the least, get the least likes amongst the general population of those who use OkCupid.
I mean,
So these are like the little things. It's like, oh, I really wouldn't talk to a black person or be friends with a black person or date a black person. Or I wouldn't want to live in a black neighborhood. Like you could think of people like, oh, I really want to live in East St. Paul or North St. Paul. And like some people will say like, oh, it looks bad or it doesn't look nice. But like a lot of it, and it's kind of an uncomfortable fact, a lot of it is, it's not as much that it looks bad. I think it's more so that they're a minority. Like white people are a minority if they were to move in that neighborhood. And that makes them uncomfortable. Makes them uncomfortable when they realize they're a minority in a neighborhood. And it's not necessarily what it looks like, it's the fact of what they feel, and they feel uncomfortable being a minority.
I don't
These are the
disagree
ones
with my
left behind.
opponents. There's problems. I agree. There are problems all around us. I'm not denying that. I really think though that my opponents are just telling us to keep doing the same thing we've been doing for 70 years that isn't working.
Well,
I would argue solidarity is key. We're all humans in this life together. We can't make it just us versus them. I encourage viewing everyone as an individual. Get to know people and stop defining them by race. That's what I think matters most. This is how we get past this.
I argue that you're acting as if we've been equitable for 70 years. We have not.
We have not been equitable
We have
for
not
70
been-
years.
We have not.
We've
been
finally
giving-
become non-racist after 70 years.
like
maybe.
we're
just recently.
maybe becoming more equal, but we are not becoming. We're starting to become equitable.
Well,
And the
you
problem
said yourself
is-
the 1950s.
But that's when the law changed.
Yeah.
That's not when people's attitudes
No,
changed.
like
Okay.
I would.
so black people, why there are gangs of black people who sell drugs, and it's because they want to feel safe in their own bodies, and white people were racist against them and literally killing them and walking away unblamed without any sort of laws to reprimand them. Like they could freely kill black people.
And
And this is from a book written, it's between the world and me, and that's kind of how they reacted to racism against them. They wanted to feel safe, so their desire to control the streets became their way of feeling safe. Essentially, is their goal. And I just think when you look at the poverty rates of black people versus white people, of Native Americans versus white people, it's a clear sign that there's an issue where we need to actually put more money and resources into making
Money. So in 2020, $66 billion is being spent by the top 1,000 Fortune 500 companies. That doesn't include the government or other nonprofit organizations. This is like year after year after year. These initiatives have no incentive to make things better. In fact, the worse job they do, the more they get paid the next year. They just keep driving a wedge, making us versus them. You say the word them and they constantly. You're not really connecting with your fellow humans. I'm part of a labor union. We're connected in a way that ignores race. It makes us strong, and I like it. I know Marines I work with who say they would gladly sacrifice their life to save another Marine, regardless of race. The Marines do not recognize race. They don't separate their units by black and white. They don't treat their racial groups any different, ever. They did, well, I would say they did that in pre-World War II maybe, but they don't do that now. They learned their lesson. It's not a good idea to segregate people this way.
It's not that every institution and everybody is racist. Like, and I think the George Floyd riots really portrayed this more than anything else. Is that why was the black community so outraged by the death of George Floyd? Why were so many people outraged? It was because they saw that as a classic example of how a black man is treated different than a white man under the law. And under law enforcement specifically. And law enforcement classically arrests more black people, and their punishments are worse for the same crime. This has not been showing that color, that racially blind is working at all. And that's the way the law is. For a man getting arrested out of a store for, I don't even know what, supposedly drunkenness, and the reaction to this is to pull the guy out of his car and put his knee on his throat. These are the things that the black community was outraged by. This would never happen to a
I disagree
white man.
that all communities were outraged by it. It wasn't a black issue. It wasn't a black issue. In addition, it's not a racially blind system we have. You don't spend $66 billion to make us racially blind. The
legal system is racially blind. They don't say a black man, supposedly it's racially blind. They don't say a black man and a white man get different sentences.
What are you talking about? The judge handing down the over harsh sentence on the black guy sees the black defendant there. Of course it's not racially blind. Every human being involved in the decision-making process within the system observes who is there.
Right.
It should be racially blind.
Yes.
It absolutely should be, but it's not currently. So I'd like to ask you guys, do you think that racial differences are getting better or worse on the path that we're on?
Racial differences are getting better or worse?
Racial tensions, is racism increasing? Is the path that the America has been on, is it driving a wedge between us, or is it bringing us closer together? That would be my...
That's a hard question to answer.
Well, and then also the cause of it. You're assuming the cause is brought off by affirmative action or those sort of things. Versus, I would say...
So you don't have an answer to the question. It's just a perpetual problem that will never be solved. We can never solve race.
The government can be run...
a racial hierarchy.
Give me some time to answer the question here.
The government
First
can
of
be
all,
run by anyone of any color.
Yeah.
It doesn't discriminate. It's based on law. It's
Yep.
based on a godless system.
Yep.
It is culturalists, really, and how we try to run it. I don't think government is the issue here. It is how we view families of black people that have generationally been discriminated against based
So if the
on
government is made up of all different kinds of people, and society is made up of all different kinds of people, then how is all of the different kinds of people creating a racist society? That sounds like the multicultural
not everyone.
future we all want.
I think
not
this
everyone.
idea of racial blindness is an impossible thing to achieve because of all the histories that each race has experienced.
Yeah.
Like white people came to this country, we had the power to take it over and take it from the Indians and then go to Africa and ship a whole bunch of black people over here to run the
So my opponents use the
nations.
words we and they an awful lot. I'm just trying to say, like, groups can be inclusive and exclusive. In fact, by their very nature, they're both. A Marine, for example, is inclusive. Marines are Marines. But not everybody's a Marine, so they exclude. I'm a Teamster in my union. Not everybody's a Teamster, so we exclude the Teamsters. But Americans should be Americans. When you call somebody an African American, it automatically excludes them. It puts them in the they category. Them, they, and that's we. You've got to stop it here and now.
See,
We're all Americans.
But we were already doing the we versus they. We already actually we used to have a worst word for African Americans, and we're saying let's try to undo that racism that happened in the past and that divide in the past. And the way we do that is not just by, ignoring the problem, which is what you're saying. Yes, I will say tensions have been getting worse, and it's because we've been ignoring the problem. In the black community has been said, ignoring the problem is not making this better. And we are upset and we are impatient at how much everyone is ignoring the problem and how much worse things are getting for us and how little things have changed. And everyone thinks, oh, everything's getting better, everything's happy and
I don't think anybody
hunky-dory.
thinks it's getting better. And I think you're trying to say that people have been doing our approach, and that is, I don't agree. The media just doesn't talk like me at all. They talk like you, but they don't talk like me. The media is just hell-bent
I
on the us
remember
versus them argument.
Popular
I was
culture for the
taught
last
growing up.
decade has been saying the things that you guys are saying, but it's continuing to get worse because it's not unifying. It fractionalizes people into different groups rather than viewing them as a cohesive whole.
So Derek and I grew up, and many of us grew up with going to school saying, don't look at race. And that's where I'm coming from with this thought. Don't look at race. Don't look at race. Treat everyone equally, treat everyone fairly. And it's only been in recent times when people have now been like, hey, we've tried this. We've been doing this. We've tried looking at everyone equally. And then what happens is we're not treated equally. There is still a significant portion that's racist. We have institutionalized racism that has still affected us to this day. So we don't have those equal opportunities. And they are upset by this. They are outraged by this, and they are asking for help. They're asking for help to get back to that level of opportunity that we were born with. And that's all
a
they're
mainstream
asking
media
for.
narrative. You're being lied to. It's not working.
All right. So that's a great point. There are some institutions who are still not treating people equally. So we should make those institutions treat people equally instead of treating them different.
Sure. But what about the things that the situations in which we have put them in an unfair advantage,
Yes.
like a ghetto, how do we get them out?
Well, it's not by treating them differently.
Well, if you just suddenly treat them all equally, is that even going to change anything?
It's a step in the right direction. It gets people to operate as citizens. So the whole concept that this argument is based off of, that we need to treat different racial groups differently, like the concept underlying it is that we need to get them to start behaving like white people.
No.
And you're not going to do
It's
that
about
by
providing-
not giving them the same circumstances.
It's about giving them, these impoverished people, the ability to get up to our level.
Yeah,
To
And
give them
they
exactly.
need.
I like what you said. You said impoverished people for the first time.
Hold on. It's
You're
like,
categorizing them by not race. Thank you.
so I don't like to. So like you take maybe a disabled human being and a person who's fully capable of doing things on their own. This disabled human being may need help in some way. You have to divert extra resources to give that person more help.
Agreed. Race is not a disability.
I wouldn't say race is a disability, but I'd say we've created a disability and a disabilitating environment for them by putting them into ghettos.
It's a generation.
I think that's what you guys are continuing to do. I'm trying to stop that.
We have not continued putting them into ghettos. We are trying to break that ghetto environment that we've created in and figure out ways to economically, we are saying we need to create solutions to getting them out of a ghetto and getting them out of that environment that we put them into. For example, these are the sort of things that I'm talking about. In Canada, they have sort of their equivalent of the Bronx over there. And they've tried for a number of years of, racially colorblind society and just saying like, hey, just like do better. We're racist laws are off the books, just do better. Nothing was working, nothing was changing. And then what they discovered is if they started offering incentives to these minorities and these impoverished people to go to school and to go to extracurricular activities like our white parents would do for us, they actually started succeeding better and getting more likely to be employed, more likely to stay away from gangs, stay away from illegal activity. And what they did to provide those opportunities is they simply gave them a bus pass. So in some sort of ways, they paid them to go to school and to participate in extracurricular activities and give them opportunities in the same way as somebody not impoverished and not forced into poverty. These are the things that we're sort of saying, classical examples that we want to give those that we've created, those ghettos that we've created in America. We want to give them the same opportunities we were given, that our parents were able to provide for us since they weren't in the same level of poverty and like impoverished culture that different one that they were born into compared to what we were born into. And that's the issue that we're talking about is they are literally born into poverty and into an impoverished culture that does not encourage hard work, and in which they were told, you have to do what you're told and you will never succeed. And they were told this generation after generation after generation. And this is what's taught to them. You can read books by people born in the ghetto of Chicago, and they will say, we are told by everyone around us that we will never succeed, and we literally teach this to everyone else. And that's the culture that they're born into. And you can't say like, oh, how come they're not succeeding? How come it's not working?
I'm saying that individual, that sucks. I'm sorry that that's the experience they had. I'm not questioning somebody's success based on that story. That sucks.
Sorry, I'm going to jump in. This is going to be our last topic on the free info panel. I let it go a little long. Would you guys like to rebuttal any further on that statement, or are we ready to move?
I'm ready to move.
Okay.
I think so.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. That was a very good free discussion. I let it run a little long, but I felt like we had some good topics coming out, and it seemed that both sides were engaged, so I was happy to see that. So now we're going to move into the questions phase of our debate. So,
Hearing an alcoholic beverage poured.
If you couldn't already
These
tell.
questions are brought to you by
Alcohol.
Old Tom Gin.
yep,
Best gin.
we have a very eager question asker, and he's in person, so he gets to ask the question in person. We're going to move to Michael Heidelberger. Please direct if you have a person you're directing it to, please let them know.
Side or
I
person.
think
If it's for both, go ahead and do that.
it's for both, but I think it's more for the people for the motion. I'm wondering, so growing up, one of the statements you would hear, it's not what you know, it's who you know to succeed in the workforce. And I'm just wondering for these, I'll say blunt, black people in these communities, ghettos, that can't get out of social circles that are very damaging, or they don't know any rich person or even anyone who even has a job. How do you help those? If you're racially blind, how do you help those people in those situations?
I get to know them. I'm surrounded by minorities in many of my different jobs I've had, including the one I'm at now. I love talking to people about the war-torn societies they've come from, their rich histories they talk about. Individuals are amazing to talk to. People will tell you fascinating things, and they'll have widely diverse opinions that really one couldn't predict by their race. You get to know all the peoples because, yes, you can help people you meet. That is what you do. That is my answer to you. Get to know them right away.
My answer to that would be that the concept of it's not what you know, it's who you know is correct from a small, short-term micro perception. You may get a job because you know someone that someone else doesn't, but building a career is what will lift impoverished people into a higher social class, and a career is not a single job. If you don't get one job, you move on to the next one and get that job, and you keep going forever. I mean, that is a part of life. Life is a constant struggle, and life in general is not fair. It's not possible to make life equally fair. Inequality, in a very general sense, not in a racial one, is not something that will ever be solved. The top 10% of stars contain 90% of the solar mass of the universe. Like, there will always be people who are doing better than others, but you can do better in your own life by never giving up and not giving into the narrative that based on your race, you just don't have a shot.
I want to say your idea of being interested in someone's culture, like racial history, their racial background is very much based on their culture. So you're interested in someone just because of their race, in a sense.
Well, I'll be racially blind at a systemic level, but if an individual wants to tell me anything about themselves, I am eager to hear it.
Okay.
Well, I think too, you're a good example of someone who is, very open and, willing. You were somebody who was willing to move to, an area that was very minority diverse and ethnically diverse. Now, I don't see a whole lot of rich white people moving to North Minneapolis, moving to East St. Paul, moving to a tribal land and seeking out those people to make those business connections with. And that's sort of the trouble that I think we often see with that job making.
Yeah.
And it's hard to establish a career when you don't have those diverse people and those people who do have the capital to start you off in an industry that is thriving, that's outside of your realm and outside of your ghetto.
In terms of what Derek was saying, like, you just keep working extremely hard and you'll eventually get there. Well, white people who already know someone who's doing well, they can get there pretty quickly based on that experience.
So can healthy black people and Native Americans.
Yes.
Anyone who knows someone who's extremely successful has a leg up.
There is less of them in the impoverished communities of black people.
All right, I'm going to jump in. I think that question's mostly been answered. We have more questions to get to. So I have a question for both sides. I recently heard an interview with a black male that said he was attending a university class that taught him new ways that he was being a victim of racism that he didn't realize. I just want to know, what are your thoughts on this?
I'm sorry. That sucks. That feels bad for you and me. I wish I could hear more. That's not a lot of details, but you're probably not wrong. Let's hang out. Let's have a beer.
Yeah, I think, to some degree, if you are, being taught things that you didn't even know was racist, and you had no idea that they were affecting you in that way. I mean, to some degree, some of this sounds made up, and then also some of it just sounds like there are things you didn't realize, right? And I don't like people making up facts or making up things. I think that's a huge atrocity, but I also think there's something enlightening about hearing something that bring something brought to your awareness that you hadn't considered before. So I think there's both sides of that issue that you have to sort of consider is what exactly was it? I don't know.
We don't have a lot to go on that one, do we?
Yeah.
And it's not even firsthand, it's secondhand. That's very little to go on.
Mm-hmm.
It's open.
Well, I'd just jump in and say I don't want to repeat what Ben and Boone have already said, but if you have never noticed some sort of obstacle in your life until someone else told you about it, it's probably not an obstacle. You're probably a victim of propaganda. Propaganda, yes. I get that there are obstacles that people might not realize, but on the other hand, I'm giving the person the benefit of the doubt and assuming that they are actively engaged in their life and trying to improve it. If they haven't noticed this thing as an actual obstacle, I think it might not actually be an obstacle.
All right, good answers. We have another question from our favorite Michael Heidelberger.
This one's for the opponents, so I'll set it back. What are your thoughts on Black Twitter or Black job fairs or the Black Caucus? Do you think this helps or hurts racial bias or interactions?
Well, can I mention Black History Month on that list?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Because I was just thinking about that in the car because it was mentioned on the radio. And I thought how appropriate we're talking about race on Black History Month because it's February right now. And I was thinking, a lot of people don't like Black History Month or, don't see the point. But I think Black History Month is a wonderful thing. I love history for one. And when you are a member of a minority, and Seth mentioned this earlier, such as the Native American minority, we here in our own Western, very white, European-dominated society, the domination of white people, right? And it's not necessarily that the other minorities weren't participating, it's just that they were suppressed from participating. And why we have things like Black History Month and Black Twitter and whatnot is to give those people a voice and to tell them, you can succeed. You are a human being. You are capable of amazing and wonderful things. And we want to mention those amazing and wonderful things that Black people have done historically and on Twitter and other pages, and to give them a voice. And that's what it's about, is to make sure that they have their voices heard and those opportunities made aware.
I guess I want to rephrase, I'm sorry, but with the Black History Month, I guess exclude that because Black History Month, everyone's included in that. Like the Black Caucus, where you can only be Black to be in the caucus, or Black Twitter, everyone's included in that. So I would exclude that from the question as well.
I guess I don't know.
Those exclude, like a Black job fair. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that comes from a lack of understanding the history of what Black people, African Americans and Native Americans, and just people in minority have gone through, but in particular, in this case, Black. Like, generally, everything has been primarily white people. If you're Black and you're in an event, you're probably not going to get noticed. Like, it's just something they feel in these situations of everyday life. Like, you don't see many Black people on a newscast or a radio cast. Like, it's just not the domination, you know? It's like they feel small and they want to feel bigger.
To build off Seth's point, it's to give them an opportunity. Where at a regular job fair, they might not have the same opportunities as a white person had. But at a Black job fair, they would have the same opportunities. And that's the point, is to give them the same opportunities.
Yeah. Do you guys want to rebuttal?
Yeah, I'd rebut with just the concept of creating spaces for only people of color only serves to isolate those people from the rest of the population. To what I believe it was Seth said, like, there are no Black newscasters or Black leaders in various groups. This is patently untrue, especially in the last 12 years. I mean, we literally had a Black president. I know that this is something that probably has been in everyone's mind.
I didn't say there's no, I said there's not very many.
Well, I mean, I can appreciate that, but one thing to keep in mind is that Black people are a minority within the United States.
But they're not represented in the same amount of minority as they are in the the same. So I think it's 8% of the U.S. population is Black. They're not represented that way in Congress. They're not represented that way presidentially. They're not represented that way in the high income classes.
Well,
they're not represented that.
Technically, in the last 20 years, Black people have been overrepresented in the terms of the president. I mean,
within the last 20 years, since they've been allowed to vote, okay.
Yeah. Okay. There's been one Black president in the history of the entire United States in existence,
longer than
and that's
20
overrepresented.
Well, since the KKK has stopped suppressing the white vote, the Black vote, sorry. Like, that's been within the last 60 years.
The KKK has been irrelevant.
And then you're also choosing the 20 years. Within 20 years, there's only 4 presidents. So of course that's going to be a very skewed statistic, for one. If we could look at the history of since they've been, let's go since the history since they were supposedly allowed to vote in 1861. That's I could do the math for you, but I guarantee you that's way less.
Sounds
than
like
20%.
we agree on everything we've said. So next question.
Yeah, we're gonna move on. So we have another question. One is from myself for the team against the motion. You said that racial blindness will probably never work. If you have an end goal, how would you determine when we stop supporting one race more than another?
I think the end goal of that would be to, when we see poverty rates at a equal level between Black, whites, and American Indians and Hispanics, like, our poverty rates are a very clear example of how unequal things really are between each race. Right in front of me, white people in the United States, 9% poverty rate. Black people, 21.2% poverty rate. Hispanic, 17.2%. And Native Americans, 24.2%. White are 9%, just to repeat that.
I'd say that regardless of what these fine, intelligent young gentlemen say, there is no end goal to the agenda that they represent. There will never be enough diversity. There will never be enough representation. There will never be enough prosperity. As soon as any metric that they lay down, including poverty, is met, their perspective will shift to the next thing on the horizon. There will never be a point in which the philosophy that different groups must be treated differently will ever end. It will go on continually. Like
The
as long as
opposition could
trying-
tell us what our own goals are and aren't. I just don't think that's a fair thing that they're allowed to say. I think I would very much agree with Seth's goals that the poverty line would be a great metric that almost every American could agree on. That saying like, yeah, so we have, the black people make 8% of the population, but they make 21% of the poverty rate. And, white people make 80% of the population and are 9% of the poverty rate. That is some crazy, racist.
I think you misspoke
systems.
that, but it's just math. Nobody cares about math.
Yeah.
Whites are the major group in poverty. There's no larger mass of people.
See,
So they're not
no, that
9% of
percent.
poverty. 9% of whites are in poverty, but the majority of people in
I don't-
poverty are white.
Yeah, I don't know
So
what
you're-
this
it's just
percentage-
math. Nobody
Well,
cares
yeah,
about
I don't
it.
know what this exact percent. I don't know what the exact study is, so I can't speak to whether you said it correctly or if I did, because I don't exactly understand where.
Of
the
people
stats
in
come
poverty, most are white, but that doesn't matter. It just you misquoted.
I think where your issue is with your argument is you want to mesh everyone together.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
people, human beings,
Not everyone.
Yeah.
Just Americans versus all those other countries I don't
yeah,
like.
whatever,
Yeah.
Americans, people are naturally going to be racist no matter who they come from. You're going to always be able to tell a red apple from a green apple. It's, they come from different trees of families.
I agree. So what's your point?
So my point is, if we are able to be aware of these disparities, we should try to figure out why.
I agree. We're trying. I'm racist. You're racist. You use the word us and them a lot. Try to you it less.
I don't think that's what it's about. I really don't. It's about trying to create equal opportunities for everyone. And in order to do that, we have to recognize the injustices of the past that have made their stamp and permanence on the present, and to erase them and to make this a better place. And once we've achieved those things, then our end goal is in sight. And then we can perhaps be a, colorblind society. But we first have to, in today's present day and age, address those atrocities, address that disparity that's happening here and now. And then maybe later we can reevaluate where things are. And once everyone's on an equal playing field, we won't have to view somebody different by race, because we say we've made everyone equal. Everyone has equal opportunities. The past injustices have gone away. We no longer have a whole area in Minnesota where there's an ethnic minority that makes up the majority of that group. That's not a thing. We don't have to worry about that anymore.
So I'm going to move on to final rebuttal to a statement, then we'll go to closing statements for that.
I don't know if I have a rebuttal to that specific what he said.
My only rebuttal is that earlier you claimed that we currently have ghettos, and then now you're saying that we don't anymore, apparently.
When did I say that?
No, I think he's trying to say in this hypothetical future, he's agreeing with us that he'll do it in 160 years or something, but not now. In this 160 years from now, in this future, then we are racially blind.
When
but not
everything
now.
is equal.
Yeah.
When
He's saying be racially blind.
When we make equal opportunities
Yes.
happen, then we can perhaps live in this ideal Star Trek world.
And was I
in which
wrong with the estimate of 160? What would your estimate be when this happens?
I have no idea when
No
it's
idea.
going to happen.
But just
It all depends.
You guys make it sound like 150 years is nothing.
Well,
so
it all depends.
1,000 years?
Well, it's hard to
That's
judge.
that's a legitimate question.
Well, it's hard to-
Fucking shit. Fucking hell.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to judge what human attitudes and culture are, right?
God, we can make so much more progress.
We might have a very racist president. We might have.
Biden is a racist piece of fucking shit. You should listen to that guy talk.
Yeah,
You're gonna
We'll
go
go
fired.
statement first.
We might have.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm glad someone brought it up. The 94 crime bill, poor kids are just as good as white kids. Come on, right?
Piece of trash. Did I say president? I meant former Vice President Biden. He's not my president.
All right, moving on to closing statements. Rousing round of questions and answers, gentlemen. Good job. All right, so for the closing statements, each debater will get 2 minutes, similar to the opening statements. And we're going to move in reverse order. So, of the group, I should say, so we'll start with you, Ben, to begin your closing statement.
When your parents and their parents were told that they can't succeed, all your parents, and you were taught that, and generations are born into this poverty and into this really toxic environment, it's just really hard to break out of that environment, and they need all the help that they can get. And if you believe that we should help people create those equal opportunities and break those cycles of racism that we have embedded in our culture for the last 600 years, and you believe we need to break that mentality and break those, again, hundreds of years of racism by creating some affirmative action to help those people to create those equal opportunities, you need to vote for our side. That's all I'm asking, is we just need to strive as a society to create those equal opportunities and to fight that racist past in order to create a future that my opponents say that they would like, when race doesn't even matter anymore. Unfortunately, race does still matter today. There's many racist people out there, many racist institutions left, and we still need to fight to get that equal ground. Once that equal ground is there, then we can move on. We're just not there yet. And that's what I'm asking. Vote for our side if you think we are not there yet. Those equal opportunities aren't there, and we still need to fight to make those opportunities happen. That's all I would like to say.
Thank you, Ben.
You want me? Okay.
Boone Greenlee?
First, I'll say, yep, I'm Boone Greenlee. I drank too much tonight. I apologize for that. However, it's better to be sorry than safe. I believe I'm an apologetic asshole, yes. That's correct. I believe categorizing people's needs by race is inaccurate, misleading, and hurtful. It's a lie. It sends a message to many young people of any color. You are inferior because of your skin color. My fear is some people may believe this lie. If one believes the lie, why even try? Just give up now. It's a sad thought. I say this: you are not inferior. No race is. Be racially blind. Thank you.
Thanks, Boone. That's my president.
Apologetic asshole.
Seth, your closing statement, please.
So I think this idea that you are inferior because of your skin color comes from the idea that we're trying to help you more is really just a very wrong view, because not just white people, but people of the United States have viewed, let's say, Indians as less than white people, have assimilated them into being white people. And then not only that, but today we still have a public school system where we're teaching them that white people are the people who founded this country. Like, it's assimilation that's still in the process, and we are culturally viewing them as less. And sure, I'm using the word we, but it comes from the fact that I'm a white person, and I come from the lineage of people who've developed this school system that we run by today. It's hard to come out of that and act like everyone can just suddenly be equal when we're not. And poverty rates have shown that. Even kids' test scores at high schools show that inequality by a huge margin. It's I think ignorant to say that we are can be racially blind right now. The only way to become truly equal is to become equitable first, and that's how we need to go about it.
Yes, sir. Derek, closing statement, please.
Well, I'm going balls out. In this last election, it was about as contentious as they come. People were keeping a very close eye on America's preeminent white supremacist who goes by the name of Richard Spencer, who claims that he advocates for a nonviolent transition to a white ethno-state. Richard Spencer endorsed Joe Biden based on his belief that the policies of the left of treating people differently would actively bring about the white ethno-state, the white nationalist paradise he had dreamed of more efficiently than the so-called racist Donald Trump. I would argue that while I do not believe that the opponents of the motion are racist, I genuinely do believe that they are good faith actors and they want what's best for everyone. The policies that they advocate for will make the world a worse place, will make the world a less equal place, and it will achieve the dream that many people who advocate for these policies that they ultimately they want non-whites back on the plantation, just in a different form. These policies will cripple the competence and the intellect and the strength, the economic viability of people of color, and I would encourage anyone listening to vote for the proponents because we want everyone to be treated the same and have the same opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. Wonderful debate, gentlemen. I hope that everyone at home enjoyed it. I will be posting the post-debate.
People were very enjoying it.
Really?
Yeah.
I was too drunk. I could hardly. I had to read my phone a lot. You probably could tell. I couldn't hardly.
Whoa, was there a lot of discussion on this?
Well, apparently they enjoyed it.
Oh, yeah.
Whoa.
Good, good.
Yep, so just want to say, Joe said shout out to Seth. I thought he did well. He also enjoyed the facts and quotes, and he still misses Boone. Oh.
What do you mean he misses Boone? I'm right here. I'm right here.
He misses
They're
your
just hanging out with you.
warm body.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
Your
yeah.
body.
Joe and I cuddle.
Yeah, good colors. Derek is currently taking a leak. We do have debates in for pre and post, so once he is done clearing his bowels, we will give you the results.
Star and
Acknowledge it.
All right, Derek is
Wait, what
back.
now? I was reading.
One debate. Oh, Joe's favorite as well. From a guy who only knows, or who only goes to debates when I'm playing games on the computer already. Hope I'll try to make sure I'm home playing games for the next
Oh.
debate.
Ah, we're doing it. We're doing it.
All right, everybody. We're going to move on to the voting results.
Woo! Are we live again?
Yeah, we are live.
We're motherfucking live.
All right. So pre-debate, the motion was be racially blind, which means we should not see race when making decisions and policies. The results of pre-debate were 50% agreed with the debate, 25% disagreed. Sorry, 50% agreed with the motion, 25% disagreed with the motion, and 25% of the voters were undecided. And post-debate, we had 25% disagreed with the motion, and 75% agreed with the motion.
Yeah!
The winners, Derek and Boone,
Wow.
arguing
It's hard to
for
change people's minds. You guys did it.
We did it.
That was hard.
Fuck you, Mike. Fuck you.
I like the way you rolled that out. It was kind of like, I wasn't sure. I was on the edge of my seat.
the order.
He did. I was on the edge of my seat because I was like,
I had to hold on to something.
yeah, we had to hold on to each other. We did it. Well done. Well done.
Congratulations, boys.
Congratulations. I
Would have
shook your
been,
hand.
would have been fun to
Oh,
go 25% disagree, 75% are now undecided.
I've seen debates where more went into undecided category than started. In Intelligence Square.
Bill would get winners.
Oh boy.
All right, you guys want to cut the stream?
Yeah, just give us a little sign off.
Okay, sure.
Give the folks at home.
What do you mean to play us out?
Something to
Okay, sign
remember
out.
us by.
Play it live. Fuck it.
Okay, do it live. Don't take any of that out of the debate or out of the recording.
What does it mean to end the show? To end the show?
All right, everybody at home and in the room with us. On the next debate, we'll be debating again in March, as we always do, once a month. We hope people are more than welcome and happy to join us in person, but thank you for joining us online. We again had a very rousing debate on the motion of be racially blind. Thank you for joining us. We hope you have a wonderful night and join us next time. See you later, everybody.